localwebradio.fm, your trusted voices on the Semiahmoo Peninsula.
Welcome to the Mortgage Newscast with Jared Dreyer, brought to you by Dreyer Group Mortgages. Now, here's your host.
Well, yes, Erik Reynolds here again, and I'm your host, and I'm here with Jared Dreyer, accredited mortgage professional and president of Dreyer Group Mortgages, a proud member of the Verico Brokers Network. And today we'll be talking with Jared about what self-employed people need to know to get a mortgage, including the different rules for self-employed borrowers, the proof of business documents required, and how self-employment income is verified. Now, of course, before Jared joins us, if you have questions or require assistance, you can reach Jared's team at Dreyer Group Mortgages at 800-687-9020. Again, that's 800-687-9020. Well, Jared, once again, let me welcome you to the call today.
Well, thanks very much, Erik.
Hey, Jared, and we're going to be talking about self-employed borrowers and self-employed mortgages. So let me go ahead and ask this first question. Now, are there different rules for self-employed borrowers?
Yes, there is, Erik, and that's a great question because we've had new rules that were introduced in November 2012 by the federal government regulating body, which is called OSFI. Now, this restricts self-employed borrowers, and there are two types of self-employed borrowers that it restricts. One is that has verifiable income mortgages, and another is stated income mortgages.
Now, Jared, what is the difference between verified income and stated income?
Well, verified income is similar to what it sounds. Is basically a salary may be drawn from the business or borrower and declares a higher amount of net income to Revenue Canada. So essentially what you're doing is you are self-employed, but you are paying yourself a salary, therefore declaring a T4 to yourself. Stated income is exactly what it states. It is an income that is stated by the borrower. It has to be reasonable for the industry, length of occupation, and type of business. And state income is usually based on the gross business income and is supported by additional documentation. The key thing with stated income, if you are going to any type of those programs, you must have very strong credit history.
Now, Jared, for those self-employed borrowers, what are the down payment requirements for them?
Well, if we're going the verifiable income route, if you're putting at least a minimum of 20% down payment if it's conventional. Now, there are still some lenders and some programs that allow you to put a minimum of 5% down, and of course that has to be verified with all your documentation. If you're going the stated income route, you do require a lot more down payment. It's usually 35%, and there's occasionally some of the lenders that will look at 10%, but you must make sure that all your credit history and documentation are there for sure. And, the lenders and insurers are going to go over all your documents. So I can, again, advise any clients, if they're looking at this, make sure you have your documents in order.
Now, are stated income self-employed borrowers allowed to use gift funds or borrow for their down payment?
No, that is, unfortunately, none of the ones are allowed. If you're going any of the type of routes, the down payment must come from their own sources. And, of course, you must have no down payment on any statements allowed, unfortunately.
Well, hey, Jared, we're up against the clock, so let's go ahead and take a break here, and we'll be right back with accredited mortgage professional Jared Dreyer. And when we return, we'll be discussing mortgage qualifications for the self-employed person. We'll be right back.
The Mortgage Newscast with Jared Dreyer will return after a quick word from our sponsors.
Take control of your financial future with sound investing with Byron Stryloff, Senior Investment Advisor and Chartered Financial Planner with over 30 years of experience on the Business Channel on localwebradio.fm.
If you're struggling with a dental or oral health issue, be sure to catch the Healthy Smiles Oral Health Show with Dr. Norm Ickert on the Health Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Buying or selling a home on the Semiahmoo Peninsula? Catch up on local market conditions on This Week in Real Estate with Lance and Connie Marples from Sutton West Coast Realty on localwebradio.fm. To schedule a face-to-face consultation, you can reach Lance and Connie at 604-538-8888. That's 604-538-8888. And visit them online at www.surreywhiterockhomes.com. Now, back to the Mortgage Newscast with Jared Dreyer on localwebradio.fm.
All right, we're back with Jared Dreyer, and we're discussing verifying income for self-employed people wanting a mortgage. Now, Jared, what documents may be required to provide proof of business?
Well, what documents may be required to be proof of business is that, lenders are usually looking for 2 years of business supported by at least 1 or 2 following documents there, Eric. And, what they're requiring is a business license, GST return or remittances into GST, business bank account statements, your articles of incorporation, T1 generals with statement of business activities, and audited financial statements that are prepared by an accountant. So those are the systems that they need to use.
Well, now, how do lenders confirm verifiable self-employed income?
Well, that's a good question, Eric. If you're going to be doing that, the easiest route that we find for people is to get their notice of assessments and for the last 2 years, and those are the ones you file with Revenue Canada, and they send back to you that state where your total income is. And if a borrower declares a higher income, some lenders will allow a 2-year average with a 15% of gross up of your line 150 on their NOA. And eligible add-backs can also be added to gross up your total income. And, of course, we have to make sure that all your taxes are paid and up to date.
Well, so how do lenders confirm stated self-employed income?
Well, the borrower can state their income, Eric. The income has to be reasonable for the industry and the type of business that they're in. So sometimes the lender want to see gross revenue, the 2 years audited financial statements prepared by an accountant, 2 years T1 generals with your statement of business activities, and 2 years business bank account statements.
Well, Jared, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Yeah, self-employed mortgages can be extremely complicated, especially with all the new lending requirements and guidelines that have been imposed by the Canadian government. So depending on the type of income and documentation required, it's important that you use an accredited mortgage professional with expertise in this area so that you can make sure that you're getting the best advice.
Well, Jared, thanks so much for the conversation today. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So for the listener, if you know someone who owns or is looking to purchase a home and would have questions that would benefit from what we've talked about today, please go ahead and share this podcast with them. I'm sure they'll thank you for it. Now, of course, if you yourself have mortgage questions or are considering refinancing, you can reach Jared's team at Dreyer Group Mortgages at 800-687-9020 and online at www.dreyergroup.ca. Jared, as always, for myself, for the listeners, thanks so much for the conversation today.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about Dreyer Group Mortgages, visit www.dreyergroup.ca. That's www.dreyergroup.ca. Or call 604-536-3802. That's 604-536-3802.
localwebradio.fm.
This episode is a production of Jam Media. For information on hosting your own web radio show, visit jammedia.com. That's www.jambmedia.com.
The opinions expressed by our guest and host on localwebradio.fm do not necessarily reflect the views of Jam Media or its owners. No expressed or implied opinions of any product or service should be considered an endorsement or recommendation of any kind by Jam Media or its owners.